All right, students, new location today, but I want to finish this little presentation about the Industrial Revolution. This will be a short one. So while the Industrial Revolution was going on and people were moving into cities and especially in New England, some of the people were moving off of the farms. Mostly what would happen is if big families had extra children and they didn't need those children around the farm, those children, specifically young women, would be maybe asked if they would want to or sent specifically to work in the textile mills. But a lot of people still lived on their farms, and that's especially true for most all of the people. Um, there were small family farms, and the produce was sold locally or traded locally, but then you knew this has been the rule of the Northeast since forever. All right, people who moved west of the Appalachians into the Northwest Territory, that's the area that's Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, that area, found land that are going to support fantastic crops, cash crops of wheat and corn. Huge. If you've ever driven in that area, you can drive for miles and miles and see nothing but fields of corn. Now, they use these crops to eat, to sell, and feed to cattle and pigs. So they've got a lot of uses for these crops. And we talked a little bit about this in class before now about how they use these crops. And after the invention of the cotton gin, people spread their plantations across the South. Now, it's important you understand, and we talked about this again in class earlier and even like last semester, that cotton was not a good cash crop until the invention of the cotton gin because it was so labor intensive. But once the invention of the cotton gin happened, cotton really outproduced everything else. They turned their fields of tobacco, not all of them, of course, but a lot of the rest of the fields that had been used for other things were turned into cotton fields, and slavery spread like a cancer across the South, along with the plantation system. I've got a little chart at the bottom to show you the years, the slaves, the cotton production that went with it. All right, so a corporation is like a joint stock company. And so you kind of need to understand how that works. Honestly, it's just good that you know it, period, just for life. Many people own a corporation. That's what it means. It means that it's got more than one owner. If something is owned just by one person, it isn't a corporation. It's just one person, okay? So when you have a corporation, people sell shares of it, pieces of it, to other people. That's the stock part. That's like the joint stock. Many people invest, okay? They use that money to usually plow it back into their business and expand the business is what it's used for. Or, pay people, invest in research, that kind of thing. Now, we don't have a whole lot of large corporations in the new country of the United States before the Industrial Revolution. There are a few, but not many. But during the Industrial Revolution, large corporations do begin to appear. And they help to drive industrialization because it's like something feeding on itself. And so the big companies sell pieces of themselves in like stock to other people. They get money to then reinvest and make themselves bigger, and then they build bigger factories. And so then they can expand even more. I think a really good example of this present day would be Amazon. I'm a huge fan of Amazon, and those of you who have been in my classroom for very long know that. I always talk about shopping on Amazon. And I quote facts and figures from them because it amazes me the amount of commerce they do online. And the thing is, if you look at the actual stock price of Amazon, it's good. If you want to invest in Amazon, you can. You can buy stock in Amazon. But they use almost all of the money they earn. They pay their people well, I don't mean that, but they use it almost all to plow back into their business. It's not like they are well paid. Don't get me wrong. The high up guys in their company are paid well and they make good money, and I'm sure they're all millionaires and billionaires and whatever. But a lot of the money they get from their stock holders that they sell out these pieces of Amazon, they use to plow back into their company, expand it, and do research on how to make their company better. Which is what keeps them on the cutting edge of being able to deliver a better product all the time. And that's the kind of thing that was going on in the 1800s with this first industrialization of the United States. A lot of these corporations would use their money to plow back into their own companies to make them bigger, better, more efficient, and then the whole cycle would start over again. Okay, the growth of factories and trade led to the growth of towns and cities because of course, especially in the Northeast, these initial factories, there's no such thing as a steam engine yet. They have to be built where there's rivers, swift flowing little rivers. And so the towns and cities grow up close to those. You can see the pattern on the map. In fact, you can still see a pattern on the map where most of the towns and cities are built near water, or like later on, they're built near railroad heads. Um, so people then, because they want to be close to where they work, they will then often, the cities built up around where the factories were, okay? And again, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting pattern. You can see it all over the globe, actually, where the cities are built, they're either on the coast of countries or along rivers of countries, because that's originally where they ended up. All right, and cities are not always a good place to live back in those days, especially. There's no such thing as a good sewage system. In fact, they don't know anything about cleanliness or how they get diseases or anything else like that. It's just nasty. There's no fire department. There's no police department. They haven't even thought of something like that yet. And so usually what happened is in the springtime, there would be the people would be pretty not healthy, because of course during the wintertime you catch colds and stuff, but it was almost better during the winter, because in the cold months, we don't know this because we live in the South, but in the cold months, the cold temperatures tend to kill off some of the bacteria and germs, all right? But during the springtime then, when things start to warm up, you would get massive outbreaks of diseases, like in, say, late February, March, April, along in there. And you'd get huge die-offs of populations. There's been some interesting novels and things written about that. So it wasn't always a good place to live. In fact, a lot of times what people would do, people who had money, they might live in the city through the winter, and then in the summertime, they would leave. They would have a summer home as well, to get out of there. Especially diplomats that lived in Washington, D.C. would always try to get out of there in the summertime. All right, but still there's jobs. There's jobs in the city, so it still drew people in, and eventually things happen there. Things get better. They become centers of learning. There's libraries, there's zoos, there's schools eventually. And so over time, things get better. Now, of course, it takes a long time, especially for the disease end of it. But over time, things do get better, and people start to come there. But as you can see by my little pictures at the bottom with dead horses lying in the street, it's not a good place to be at first at all.